these last two lectures will be about experiments. And this experiment I did with somebody who used to be a student of mine, and now is no longer at Penn, Alex Chavez. And what we wanted to look at is, you know, there are lots of experiments about punishment. You know, people, third parties like to punish people who violate, okay, social norms. And we wanted to look at whether, if people are given the choice, they would also compensate victims. And the results are very interesting. And tomorrow work will be on emotions. What sort of emotions support punishment versus compensation? And when people compensate, are emotion, you know, generic, like, well, you know, we feel empathy for the victim and therefore we compensate? Or does anger play a role? This is very important. Okay. So let's look at all the stuff that has been done on punishment. And the idea is that what is called altruistic punishment is punishment by third party. So imagine you are in a situation in which you are shown the result of some game, okay, in which one player, let's say there are two players in the game, one player behaved poorly, was not nice to the other player in the game, and you are given some money from the experimenter, and you have a chance to take away money. We never say punishment or compensate. You add or you take away, okay? And there are lots of experiments that show that third party give money in order to punish the bad guys, let's say, okay? That's why it's called altruistic punishment. And the idea is it is the main mechanism to uphold social norms, okay? When a social norm is violated, people will punish. However, I was wondering why other mechanisms were not explored experimentally. And one is positive sanction. So these are negative sanction, positive sanction, i.e. sometimes a norm follower may be rewarded. And in this experiment, we allow for that, okay? And both positive and negative sanction promote a norm. Why? Because by sanctioning in a plus or minus way, we basically increase the long-term expected respect of the norm, okay? What about compensation for a victim? Compensation does not promote a norm, but signals a norm, upholds a norm. So compensation is a slightly different mechanism, but it's very important within a community. And it has an important signaling function. When I compensate the victim of a violation, I tell everybody this guy should have received, okay, a different amount of money, let's say, or different goods, but he didn't. So we have a problem here. Now, there are several studies, and some are very interesting. First of all, if you ask victims, unless it's a terrible crime, they much prefer compensation to punishment. So I am victimized, and you ask me, what do you prefer? And people will say, prefer compensation more than, you know, I'm not that happy that somebody gets punished for what they did to me. I want to be compensated if I have a choice. Grommet is a very interesting study with experimental data support, again, a preference for reparative sanctions, so for compensation for offenses that are not terrible, non-violent. And of course, when the crime is heinous crime, is terrible, people tend to think that, you know, then we should start punishing people. But for a lot of minor crimes, people prefer compensation, think that people should be compensated, and punishment is not that important. And then I will talk tomorrow about that. Eliciting empathy, so artificially eliciting empathy, results in a preference for compensation. Now, there is another work that I didn't quote here, which is very important. Two sociologists from Stanford did a study of political preferences. So what sort of politician do people prefer to vote for? And it looks like the most preferred politician are people who compensate victims. Of course, if the crime is terrible, the politician has to punish, but for minor crimes, the politician who compensate is perceived as a better politician and, lo and behold, more competent. This is very interesting. So the nicer guy is also perceived as more competent, which is strange, but that's how people respond, okay? We know that feeling threatened, okay, predicts compensation. And, you know, what's the role of compensation in society? I believe that is a strategic, that is a way to foster social ties, surely. Is it strategic? Strategic way versus way to foster social ties are two very different things. If it is strategic, strategic is irrational. I compensate because I think, you know, it will have a positive effect on me, then I would compensate only when the victim, first of all, is aware of having been harmed. So I give you money, but you must know that you have been harmed. And you are aware that I am compensating you. Okay? So this is very important. And the results we give weaken the strategic argument. So for sure, compensation fosters social ties, but not strategically. You know, it's not so much a strategic behavior. We shall see. So our goal in this experiment has been to compare different mechanisms of, you know, third-party punishment or compensation of victims. And our hypothesis is that when we allow people to punish, compensate, or reward, all three mechanisms will be used. Okay? Now, one thing we wanted to do also was to check if third parties are sensitive to the context of decision makers. Okay? We know that people are very sensitive to context in experiment. We are very sensitive to context. Okay? And we know that punishment by second parties is very sensitive to context. I give you an example. Suppose that we play an ultimatum game. Do you know what the does everybody know what the ultimatum game is? Very good. Okay. So imagine you're one of my subjects. Okay. You come to the lab. You are paid $5 for participation. You pocket them. And then you go in front of a computer, and you are in a little box, so you don't see the other people. You cannot communicate with other people. And I make very sure that there is double blind, so that other people don't know what you choose. This is a typical setup. And I don't know what you choose, because you are a number. Okay? So I assign you a number. And then, you know, usually randomly, you are assigned to one or two roles, proposer or responder. Okay? Suppose you are a proposer. Proposer means I tell you, I give you $10, okay? For the moment, they are putative dollars. I give you $10, and you have to decide how to divide these $10 with this anonymous responder. Okay, the responder may accept your proposal. You know, the responder doesn't see you in the face, doesn't know who you are, etc. May accept your proposal, in which case, you know, the division goes through, or the responder may reject your proposal, in which case I keep the money. Okay, you get nothing. Now, what do you think people do in one shot, anonymous games. Okay? I show you here. The modal and median offer are 40-50%, between 40 and 50%. Okay? The means are 30-40. Offer of 40 or 50% are rarely rejected. Offer below 20% are rejected half of the time. Okay? So, is it clear what the ultimatum game is? Should I repeat? Is okay? Very good. So let's go back here. Now, there is a variation. So the typical ultimatum game, you know, you are randomly chosen to be a proposer, okay? So you draw, for example, from a box a number. If it's an odd number, you are a proposer. Even number, you are a responder. So completely random. In other cases, we ask people to read something, okay? You read an article. And then we tell them, you know, we will ask you questions about what you read. And these are not intelligent questions, because people resent that. These are just questions that mean you paid attention, okay? And then what we do at the end, we say, okay, there are people that responded above this number of questions, and they will have earned the right to be proposers. And there are people who responded basically less well, less questions. It doesn't mean they are stupid, it means they paid less attention. And they will be the responders, okay? So in the case of the purely random assignment to proposer and responder, okay, people see the situation as one of equality, okay? There is no reason to keep more money. But as soon as we introduce some merit, people see the situation as one of equity. I will show you what does it mean, okay? We know from a lot of experiments, these are the oldest and most important experiments that show that people are very sensitive to entitlements, okay? So if the proposer is a proposer because he won a contest, this person will offer less money, less than 50%, okay? If we say that the proposer was designated or earned the right to allocate, in the earned condition, not in the designated one, in the earned condition, equity trumps equality. The proposer will offer less, okay? They feel entitled to offer less. It's ridiculous because they didn't do anything strenuous or of great effort. And also, when you give people the idea that the role is superior, for example, Katrin Eckel put a gold star on proposers. A gold star, it means nothing. They offer less. You know, is this idea that they are somewhat better, okay? They deserve more. Okay. So there is a lot of, you know, evidence that people, when they feel entitled, for the stupidest reason in the world, but they feel entitled, they offer less, okay? So we did with Alex Chavez, we did a two-stage study. In the first stage, a group of people play the ultimatum game, and we divide this group into two subgroups. One group play the traditional ultimatum game, and so the idea is they should share equally, and they do. And the other is the equity context. And in the equity context, what we did, we asked the players to read this article, a very simple article, and then we ask comprehension questions. And those who did better have the right to be proposers, and those who did worse will be the responder. So it is what is typically seen as an equity context. And we got very typical results. The proposer offer is sensitive to context, so the average offer is 45 inequality, 35% of the sum in the equity. And the rejection rates are really insensitive, and this is a result we know, because proposers never go below a certain level. They are not stupid, okay? You know, they offer less, but not that much less that they can expect a rejection, okay? So rejection is not very common, you know, is to, you know, a 35% offer is okay. If you go down to 20, 25, then you start having rejections, okay? Is that clear? Okay. Stage 2 is the interesting story. So from stage 1, we take example of people who choose 5-5, people who choose 7-3, and people who choose 8-2, okay? So this is a completely different group of subjects. You're my subject, you are all third parties, okay? And each of you will get information about one particular game that was played before in stage 1, okay? And you may receive the information that the players played 5-5, or that the proposer kept 7 and offered 3, or the proposer kept 8 and offered 2. And the responder always accepted. Okay? The responder accepted. So that's the money they got. Okay? The information you get, maybe so is a 3x2x2 design. The information you get, maybe suppose you get information about 5-5. Okay? So, oh, they played 5-5, and it was an equity condition, or they played 5-5, it was an equality condition, okay? So we vary these. So one person may receive 5-5 equality. And then, you know, there are 2 more conditions. In one condition, you can only punish. You can only deduct money, okay? And in another condition, you can do whatever you want. You can reward, you can compensate, you can punish, your choice. You can mix, your choice, okay? So let's suppose you receive, let's say 5-5, you know is an equality condition, and you are in the all adjustment. You can reward people, okay? Typically you won't punish anyone if 5-5 was offered, but you can reward the guy, the proposer who offered 5-5. And suppose instead you receive 5-5 equity and deduct only condition, you won't punish. And typically you won't see any punishment in that case, you know, unless people have really spite for people who give equal. So is it clear? Okay, so each of you would receive only one of these, 5-5, 7-3, or 8-2, one of these conditions and one of these 2 conditions. Now, as I told you, I gave you $5 at the beginning just for participation, just for being here, okay? And then I give you a big envelope with 20 quarters. So a quarter is 25 cents, okay? And you could spend up to 10 quarters for P and or 10 quarters for R. You cannot spend more than 10 quarters for each of them, okay? You understand that? So what I do, I give you, you have the big envelope with all these quarters, and you have 2 envelopes, responders, proposer, okay? And you put the money that you decide. You can keep all the money, by the way. You can go home with all the money. There is nothing that prevents you from doing that. It's fine and it's anonymous. And some people do, very few, okay? So suppose that you want to compensate the responder. So you do add, you know, you cross add and put the money here, okay? Suppose you want to compensate, so suppose you also want to punish the proposer, and so you cross deduct and put the money in, okay? And for each quarter that you spend, you add or deduct $1. This is a wonderful rate of exchange, okay? So if I put, let's say, in the proposer, deduct, you know, I put only 25 cents, the proposer will lose $1, okay? Is that clear? Okay. All right, so this is important. In the all adjustment condition, you can, you know, do whatever you want. You can add to anyone, you can take off from anyone, you can combine, you know, just to your heart content. In the deduct only is a punishment, typical punishment game. You can only deduct, okay? So it depends on which condition you are, what you will do. Okay, this is interesting. I tell you, at the very end of the game, you will stand up and say, I am at computer number 5, okay? And I receive information about 5-5 equality, okay? And I decided to, and you say what you did, okay? So anonymity is at the end destroyed because you have to tell what you did. Why did we do that? Because we want to make very explicit the normative constraints, I mean the social expectation that people have, yes.
Did the subjects know that they had to do this at the end, already from the beginning?
No, at the very end.
You told them at the very end that they had to do it.
Yes.
They thought they were doing it.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Okay, what he said is, when do you tell people that they have to stand up at the end? Mm-hmm. Now, after the experiment, we ask people questions. Remember my story about norms? About 2 things. One is personal normative beliefs. I will show you what we do. And the other is normative expectation. And we want to see if there is agreement about, you know, what is normative, what people should do, what is fair, okay? And the question are, do you think this proposal, and we look at all of them, is fair for both proposer and responder? This is a personal normative beliefs. Incentivize normative expectation. Why do I incentivize them? Because people, you know, get bored and they answer whatever they want. And so I say, you know, at the very end of all these questions, the normative expectation question, we randomly pick 3 of them. And if you answer correctly, so you really say what the majority said, I give you $1 for each correct answer. So you can get $3 plus, so people think, you know, so incentivized, all right? So this is after the experiments. They answer 2 sets of questions about all the possible divisions. Why we ask this question? This is very important because I do these surveys in every experiment I do. Why? Economists typically say, oh, we infer norms from observation. You know, we know that if people behave fairly, there is a norm of fairness. Is there? Do we know that? Okay, we cannot conclude that a norm is present just by looking at behavior. So it's a very circular reasoning, okay? And so what I propose to do is use incentivized surveys, okay? Incentivized surveys give us independent evidence that there is, you know, some sense among the player that indeed, you know, there is a norm of fairness, okay? So we ask, is there consensus? Are actors aware that a norm exists and it applies to that situation? And, you know, we also ask what determines compliance. Do people conform to the norm or not? Okay? I told you, you know, second order beliefs are normative expectation. I incentivize them, I repeat, paying them for accuracy. So you have to think, what do other people think? Okay? And these are the, okay, if the normative expectation are consistent, then they signal the presence of a social norm, okay? Now, so instead of doing what economists do, I add these surveys, incentivized surveys. I cannot incentivize the personal normative beliefs, of course, but I can incentivize the normative expectations, okay? Now, my question is, if I discover through this survey that people believe are influenced by context, equality versus equity, will their behavior be consistent with their beliefs? It makes sense to ask, right? I would expect it to be consistent, but let's look at the personal normative beliefs. So I give all of you, each of you, this set of possible distribution, okay? And I ask you, for each one, tell me, is 10-0, for example, fair for both proposer and responder? Is 9-1 fair? Is 8-2 fair, etc., okay? I think what you would respond. So when we go to 5-5, both in condition of equity and equality, basically equality is 100%, but equity is 93%, is an average, okay? So it's very high. People think that 5-5 is really, you know, a good outcome, is fair. In the equity condition, though, look at the difference. 6-4, i.e. the proposer keeps more, 72% say is okay, okay? Only 52% think it is okay in the equality condition. So people are sensitive to context, okay? If the guy became proposer because he or she deserved to be proposer, you know, I don't know how you feel. You're in a very egalitarian society. So you may completely discount, you know, the equity story. But in America, people respond, for example, look at 7-3. 7-3 is not that good. You know, the proposer keeps 7 and gives only 3. However, 37% say it's fine. In the equity condition, only 18% say it is fine in the equality condition. So it looks as if there is a certain sensitivity about the difference between equity and equality among, you know, the subjects. And look, if you go down, okay, so the guy is incredibly generous. He keeps 4 and gives, you know, 6. 61% in the equality condition think it's fine, it's okay. But in the equity condition, only 41%. So if you look at these percentages, it's very interesting because people are sensitive to context, okay? People make a difference between equity and equality. And the first is what the proposer keeps, and the second is what the proposer gives, okay? And the question I ask you is the offer, this one, for each one you have to respond, is it fair for both of them, okay? And people make a difference between equality and equity. You see that from the numbers. People do make a difference, okay? And therefore, you know, they are sensitive. Now, do people think that other people are sensitive? This is a second question. Do the majority of other participants believe the offer is fair? I ask you. Okay, each of you, I ask this question. And again, I give you, you know, you have to answer every possible distribution. And look, it's very similar. 5-5, equity is 95% believe that the majority says, yes, it's fair. 100%, of course, in the equality. But look here, 80%, you know, believe that the majority think, yes, it's fair, you know, to keep $6. Only 65 think it's fair. And look at the difference. Almost 50% think that the majority will think that keeping 7 and giving 3 in the equity condition is fair. And only 18% think that in the equality condition. Okay, so when we ask people to judge, give me your opinion about what you think the majority responded, you know, people really make a difference between equity and equality. There is a difference in people's minds. I don't know if in your mind there is a difference, but you know, Americans make this very clear-cut difference. They have different beliefs about what's correct, what's fair in an equality condition versus an equity condition, okay? And you see that 5-5, I mean, everybody likes it, but you know, the basically this is giving more to the other guy, okay, is acceptable in the equality, not in equity, and keeping more for yourself is acceptable in the equity, but not in the equality. So you see that that spread, okay? Okay, so what can we conclude about belief? Though the entitlement of stage 1, okay, were due to earning high scores on a general knowledge quiz, so they didn't have much justification, they strongly influenced third-party beliefs about what a fair division should be, okay? So beliefs are influenced by that. So let's summarize. Fairness beliefs are unimodal, so 5-5 is a big mode. These beliefs, first and second order, are strongly influenced by the condition, equity versus equality. Mutually consistent second order beliefs suggest the presence of fairness norms. Big question, do beliefs affect judgment? Okay, so what should we expect? If adjustment is norm guided, okay, you should decrease your adjustment, decrease punishment, decrease compensation, decrease everything as the offer gets better, okay? You don't want, you know, to do anything when the offer was very good, right? Should you punish, compensate? Let's say the offer was 5-5. You know, you say, fine, I keep all the money, you were very good, great, okay? The effect of the offer will be moderated by the fairness context. So offers that are not 5-5, but let's say 6-4 or 7-3, will be more acceptable, given the beliefs, in an equity context versus an equality context. We expected that. We were wrong, actually, okay? We should observe a trade-off between punishment and compensation in the condition where you can do anything. And we expect less punishment, you know, deduct less than in the only punishment condition. So when you can punish and compensate and you choose to punish, usually you punish and compensate, and therefore you punish much less than in the all punishment condition. And we expected a reward for the proposer in the 5-5 circumstance. We expect, you know, some people will say the proposer was nice. Okay, let's reward him. Okay. So these are the results. Let's look first at the equality context. So here you go from 0 to 4, okay, and here go from 0 to 4, and here, you know, you can basically, so 0 means you do nothing, okay? You pocket all the money and do absolutely nothing, okay? And if instead you move in this direction, okay, you take away money from the proposer. In this direction, you take away money from the responder. In this direction and in this direction, you give money to one or the other, both, okay? So let's look at the deduct-only condition, when you can only punish. Clearly, when you observe 5-5, nobody punishes, okay? Here we are in the equality context. Nobody punishes. There is punishment of the proposer when he offers $3 or $2, okay? There is punishment, so no problem there. But now let's look, and this is the punishment condition, is very trivial. Now, let's look what happens with the all adjustment. You can do whatever you want. Okay, when the offer was 5-5, people reward both players. This is a totally unexpected result. I expected, well, they may reward the proposer. I have my thoughts why this happened, but you see, they reward both. They go up here. 5 means 5 was given. When 2 or 3 were given, what they do, they don't punish much, but they compensate the poor victim that got only $2 or $3. So there is a movement toward compensation and no punishment. What happens in the equity condition, though these look different, they are not significantly different. And basically what happens again, in the all adjustment condition, which is the interesting one, they give a premium to both, the proposer and the responder, and they compensate again. Okay, they prefer to compensate than punish. When they can punish, is very similar. Okay. Now we were looking, is there a difference in behavior between equity and equality? Zero difference, insignificant. Okay. So the further constant influence the beliefs, but not the behavior. The behavior is basically the same, irrespective of the difference in beliefs. Okay. So let's look at, basically what happens overall, because there is no difference between the two conditions. In the deduct-only condition, 5-5, they do nothing. Now, when 7-3 is offered or 8-2, people get punished, but how much do they get punished? There is no bonus punishment. They bring the proposer down to what he or she should have gotten, okay? So they go, in the case of 7-3, they go to 5-3. In the case of 8-2, they don't want to spend much. That is the average. They go to 6-2 on average, okay? But basically, here you can only punish. And so there is no bonus punishment. You bring the bad guy up to what he or she should have gotten, had it been fair. Now let's look here when you can do everything you want. When people observe 5-5, they reward both. And they spend a lot of money to reward both, okay, which was unexpected. And in case they observe 7-3 or 8-2, what they do, basically, they bring the victim up to 5. What the responder should have received, if the other guy had been fair. But overall, they don't punish much. Okay? So if they have to choose, I have to give money. The rest of the money I pocket. So if I have to give money, my decision will be to compensate more than punishing. Okay? But where do I stop compensating? I stop at 5. You should have gotten 5, no more. And the same is when I punish. Do I punish you tremendously? I bring you down to what, had you been fair, you should have gotten. So it's very interesting what they do. Okay, so it looks as if 5-5 is a focal point. In what sense? When I punish, I bring you down to 5. When I compensate, I bring you up to 5. So 5-5 is a big focal point, okay? And the second, is for these people, and the second most frequent for 8-2, because they may go to 6, okay, in the 8-2. They spend less money. So in the all adjustment condition, what happens? 61% of the people reward both players mostly equally. So they reward both. It was only the merit of the proposer to be an equitable guy, but they reward both. When they receive 7-3, 88% compensate. 35%, of these compensate and also punish. And of these, 18% go to 5-5. So very few go to 5-5, bring both to 5-5, because it's very expensive. Of those who receive 8-2, 70% compensate. Of these, 30% compensate and punish. And of these, 25% go to 5-5. Again, is expensive. So it looks as if you become more selfish, okay, as the cost of adjusting, you know, of paying for compensation or reward or whatever increases, okay? But still, there is a clear-cut preference for compensation over punishment. And, you know, 5-5, they give to both, 7-3, so these are, you know, the data, and 8-2. And you see that 8-2, you know, a lot of people do nothing because it's very expensive. When you observe 8-2, you want to bring 8 down to 5, you have to spend quite a bit of money, okay? And, you know, the reward is pretty interesting here. And here is basically lower because you go here. And in the punishment condition, basically they all, you know, either they do nothing or they take from the proposer, okay? Only one took from the responder. Maybe he wanted to punish the responder for accepting 3. It's not clear. I mean, it's very interesting because before doing an experiment, you quiz people. You want to see if they understand what is going through. What they are going through, and they all understood. People who don't understand twice are out of the experiment, basically. So this person, and this took, you know, 1 and 1 took from both, but this is one who took from the responder, like saying, you shouldn't have accepted 3. Okay, so what are the results? Fairness context does not matter, okay? The major effect is how much was offered and whether you can punish only or punish, reward, and compensate. These are the two main, you know, two major drivers of what happened, okay? In the punishment condition, the deduct-only condition, okay, there are more negative adjustments. That's trivial because you can only punish. But the pattern of sanctioning behavior is dramatically different when you can compensate and or punishment. This is dramatically different, it's huge difference. What we were surprised to find is that both are rewarded for 5-5. And my hypothesis is, you know, okay, I want to give you a prize because you've been very nice, but I would create an inequality if I give you more money. And therefore, people, you know, give money to both. Because you don't want to create an inequality the moment you want to praise somebody for not creating it, okay? This is my only interpretation, okay? So you want to, you know, reward norm-abiding behavior, but you don't want to create a distance between the two players, okay? The adjustments are reducing inequality, but never establishing full equality. So you don't adjust so that they both go, let's say you face a 7-3. You don't adjust to 5-5, okay? Almost never. Very few people do that adjustment, okay? So the adjustment typically bring one of the parties closer to what he or she should have had if the behavior had been fair, okay? So as I said before, the 5-5 is a focal point, okay? But you never bring people to 5-5. It's very costly because you have to punish and to compensate and spend quite a bit of money. So you don't want to do that. Now, equal division is clearly the benchmark, okay? So compensation of responder being close to 5, as I said before, and punishment reduces payoff to 5, no bonus punishment. And typically what you see is that there is much more compensation than punishment when people have the choice. It's not that they don't punish, they do, but in a very minor way, and they really like to compensate. Okay, now let's look at how much people spend to adjust payoff, okay? When they have to punish only, you know, the punishment treatment, the average expenditure was 0 for 5-5, obviously, 43 cents for 7-3, and 65 cents for 8-2, okay? Now look at the difference in the other group, in the all adjustment. The average expenditure is $1.66 for 5.5 because they reward both. 88 cents for 7.3, double what is spent in the punishment condition, and 108 versus 75 cents for 8.2. So people are willing to pay more when they have more choices, and they can also compensate victims, which I think is very interesting. So we don't just have altruistic punishment, but we have really more altruistic compensation and reward. Okay? So there is evidence for this altruistic behavior. Okay, the adjustments were obviously affected by how much the proposer offered, 5 versus 2 versus 3. Costs were higher in the all adjustment condition. And what are the motive? Again, you want to, my hypothesis, you want to reward equal outcomes without creating inequality, and you want to adjust an equal payoff to a normative value of 5, but no more than that. Okay? No bonus reward, no bonus compensation, no bonus punishment. Okay. Now, there are multiple interpretations. One is, has been suggested by many people, is, sorry, we did 2 things here. I forgot. Some group knew of the public declaration, some other didn't, okay? But there wasn't much difference. However, when they knew, we can say that second-order expectations are very relevant, and if they want to conform to the majority, they may discount context differences. But they did discount them anyway. So uncertainty has been proposed by many people who look at this paper. They say, oh, you know, people are not really certain of how to weight these asymmetries, okay? They're not really certain about the equity condition. You know, did the proposer really deserve that, et cetera, et cetera. And so did the proposer really earn his position? However, the beliefs disconfirm that, because the beliefs are that, you know, people earned, in some sense, some right, but the behavior doesn't. Okay. Another conclusion may be that normative consensus may not be a good predictor of behavior. Okay. So the questionnaire, the survey, measure level of normative consensus, but the actual behavior measures something else, the intensity with which these principles are adhered to. Okay, so we may all agree and have the same belief that 5.5 is fantastic and 6.4 is really acceptable when there is an equity context, and 7.3 is even quite acceptable, etc. But in the end, when we have to behave, we may say, you know, the 5.5 remains a focal point. We don't want to make these big differences, okay? And so this is really basically our conclusion here. I want to stop here and start discussion.
Right, thank you very much. So actually, that's exactly what I was going to ask you about, the difference between the 2 conditions, the equity and
yes.
equality in the third person, and the discrepancy you found between beliefs and behavior.
Yes.
And even before you showed that pre-final slide, it's exactly the kind of uncertainty explanation that I was leaning towards, because in the first case, when they were not third parties, they directly experienced the context for equity. You know, one were better than the others in answering questions. One had a gold star than the other. Here, if I understood, they were simply told. And since
no, here what happens is in the stage 1 game.
Yeah.
Okay, we divide the people into group. One group plays the normal ultimatum game without basically any distinction whatsoever. You are randomly chosen to be a proposer. In the second group, the equity group, you become a proposer because you responded in a more accurate way to a questionnaire about an article that I gave you to read. So you get the right to be a proposer because you did better in this test, okay? When I ask people to, tell me what do you think is fair for proposer and responder in the equality condition versus the equity condition, okay, people have different beliefs. So if you were one of my subject, I don't know, I'm saying in Sweden, maybe people completely discount the merit of answering more correctly and say, no, it doesn't matter. But people here, seem to recognize that there is some merit to being a proposer in the equity condition, okay? And so they allow the proposer to keep more money, okay?
In the case of beliefs.
Yes. Then we go to behavior. It doesn't matter.
Right. I mean, I'd love to learn more about the exact details, but this is exactly my still suggestion, that the fact that it's less direct in the third-party cases, it's a little bit our discussion Eric and I are having, that it's more emotional when you're actually involved. When you're a third person, you're disengaged. So rationally, you may think that the equity deserves it, but in terms of behavior, you're more motivated by your emotions in this case. So maybe that's why it doesn't matter.
That's an interesting hypothesis. So the belief is more cold,
exactly.
What is right, and the behavior said, no, absolutely possible. That's a very good idea.
Can I continue on the same theme?
Yes.
I mean, you did this first stage experiment with reading the newspaper article, but in the second stage, you told this story to the subjects. You could have told them whatever stories you liked. I mean, you could have a much stronger influence on their equity beliefs. I mean, you could tell them that the proposers were really merited persons and the receivers were...
I would not publish.
You would not publish, okay.
Because it would be cheating.
Yeah, okay.
That's a problem. But your suggestion is good. I could have two different stories.
You can have the two different stories to see whether that's makes a difference in their judgment. So that was my proposal actually.
Yes.
To have two. Yeah.
Yes, it might. Yeah, but still, what he says, unless it's really, is really a situation, let's say in stage one, the first game is like the one I described, and the other game is one in which people really put a lot of effort, okay? So they did put a lot of effort, and we recognize this effort, and maybe it has an effect on behavior. I'm not sure. That's a very good question.
Yeah. Okay, two questions. Both have to do with how to move from the experimental groups into, so to speak, outside the experiment groups, ordinary life, if one may say. First question, the experimental groups, how heterogeneous were they? I have got the impression that for purely economic reasons, often it comes that, you take high school pupils or undergraduate students and so on. But in order to get a results that's true for the whole of society, you have to vary it very much. That's the first question. The other one is about... you use the word punishment all the time. And
but I don't use it in the experiment.
Right. But now here you use. Then you think about how to make laws in the society. But then comes in a new question. The law, apart from what you feel about punishing and compensating and so on, it should be preventive as well. That we want laws to be. But have I got it right that this, so to speak, preventive aspect of norms are more or less abstracted away in your experiments?
Okay. Yeah. So let me answer the two things. You're right that the typical subject of this experiment is an undergraduate student. When we do them in the summer, we get people from around in their 30s or 40s, and they don't seem to behave very differently, but there is not such a large number that can say, oh yeah, I have a fantastic sample of normal people in the 30s and 40s, but there are some. But what I do now, most of the time, I do mTurk. So mTurk means that I can you know, do experiments with thousands of people on the internet. Okay. Here, you know, things have becoming better, because at the very beginning there was no control. So lots of people from India that wanted some money, you know, came and did, you know, the same experiment over and over again, and you couldn't really see if it was the same person responding 50 times or somebody else. Now we can. Okay, so one thing that I do, for example, I do mTurk before I go to the lab. So, and mTurk tells me if my hypothesis makes sense or is completely baloney. You know, so mTurk, when I go with hundreds of people, you know, and it's very cheap because you pay people like 50 cents, you know, for participating. The problem is they don't really play a game, you know. What would you do in this situation? What would you do in this other situation? But they are pretty consistent. And we can now control much better the population that responds. So this is one answer. Of course, if I were to do a huge experiment with a lot of normal people, I would spend an enormous amount of money that we usually don't have, okay? So either mTurk or the lab, and in the lab, I mean, statistically, they are pretty sound. There's no problem with that. But you may say, oh, in the lab, you have undergraduate students, you know, they are a peculiar population. But if I confront the mTurk and the lab, there are many differences. Actually, there are interesting articles about that. Okay, 2 or 3 that study exactly, you know, the difference. The second is prevention. This is a legal problem, okay, not so much a social norm problem. Because think of norm of fairness. You know, norm of fairness tell us basically in a family of situation what is okay to do, what is acceptable to do, etc. And it has nothing to do with prevention. So why were you thinking of prevention? It's a legal issue.
Okay. But even in a family, there is some kind of prevention thinking, at least in all the families that had many members, also I think. But I see your point. You're far away from what has anything with laws in a nation or state to do. Yeah.
Well, norms that are accompanied by sanctions, we know that there will be some sanction, negative sanction for not doing certain things or doing certain things, have also a prevention effect, okay, for sure. So yes, norms do also have a prevention effect. But in this case, I don't feel, you know, that is a big issue.
Thank you. I have 2 small questions. One is, the first one, well, the solution of the game from the game theoretic perspective is 9-1. I offer 9, yeah. You get 1.
Yeah.
But doesn't seem to be very relevant in what people responded.
No.
So apparently people didn't think it was more fair, and probably, but I'm not sure it's clear from what you show, not more people propose, not many proposed that.
No.
So it's not relevant at all.
It is relevant in the dictator game.
Yeah.
Okay, so the ultimatum game, the responder can reject your offer. So you start thinking, you know, what shall I offer? In the dictator game, which is exactly like an ultimatum game, the difference is that the responder has to accept, is a passive responder, has to accept whatever you send them. Still, people send something. okay, but much less than 5.
Okay.
Okay?
But, yeah.
So fairness is present to my mind when you can reject my offer, less present, if you will, when you cannot do anything.
Okay. But there's no...
But well, let me tell you something. It depends. In game theory, you make an assumption about the utility function of the players, okay? Not rationality, because rationality may mean different things. The utility function is, I suppose I am the responder. My utility function is not a social preference, but is a typical individual preference. X is better than 0. So if X is 20 cents, I will accept 20 cents, period. I don't care what you get, etc. We have lots of different utility functions that show that people care about, and so it's perfectly rational to reject. I have a utility function, I can show you, it is rational to reject. It depends what your utility function or your preferences are, basically.
Okay. So very short, relates to Ingvar's question.
Yes.
Maybe having different sample of people of different age could tell something on whether or not the perception of fairness evolves or changes through ages. Negative or positive result, one doesn't know. But
Okay.
is there any evidence in this sense or against? It seems against from what you said, but
well,
maybe...
if you look at MTurk, it's very similar to what we see in experiment. What we know from experiments with older people, there have been experiments with people in their 60s and 70s. These people are nicer, are more generous. In the social dilemma, they are nicer because they have more life experience, probably. Okay? If you do experiment with students from business school, they are pretty selfish, because probably there is a self-selection. So we never like to have business school students, in the experiments. We don't like to have that much psychology students, because psychology students are cheated all the time. And so, economists who do experiments, they don't like to have psychology students because of that. But, I get a very wide sample of students. So, but older people in the experiment that were done are nicer. Are more cooperative, basically. Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering if you have some ideas about whether there are different norms at play here in this study, apart from fairness. If it's, for instance,
what would be?
Yeah, like a norm of beneficency or care that account for some of these results, and if so, what the relation between fairness and other norms will be.
Like, for example, suppose there is a norm of beneficence, so that, when I see somebody who gets less money than somebody else, I want to compensate. Usually you want to compensate because you feel it's unjust that the guy got less money. You wouldn't compensate out of nowhere. Some people say that, some people say that the norm that guides giving in dictator games is really not fairness, but it is beneficence. Okay, because if it were fairness, you would give like 50-50 basically, but people don't. They give like $1, $2, etc. And so it's like, beneficence. In this case, I don't see how beneficence, would be involved.
I wonder whether there isn't a logical problem in deducing norms from behavior. It's basically the kind of Kripke-Wittgenstein problem. You see someone doing something, it could potentially be in conformity with a lot of different kinds of norms.
I agree.
And when you're talking about giving answer to some of these questions, you indicate that maybe with the difference between countries, the difference between people's ages, business school students, psychology students, they all seem to act in a different fashion. So how do you get around this problem?
Okay. In fairness, no, people have pretty similar ideas. If you look at cooperative behavior, there are differences. So if you do social dilemmas, you know, people from business school will cooperate less.
But do you
Period.
know that it's even fairness that you're measuring? Couldn't the behavior be explained in some other fashion?
Like what?
Well, I mean, will of God or...
No, because if you look at their beliefs, if you look at their beliefs, they are pretty in line with an idea of fairness and differentiate between fairness as equality and fairness as equity. They do differentiate that. Okay? So if I look at their beliefs, you know, they are pretty in line with our ideas of fairness. If I look at behavior, I think this explanation is very interesting. And when I look at behavior and, you know, I see 7-3, it doesn't matter that you deserve more. You know, I want to give the guy who got 3 more money. Okay? I feel bad about that. So I think the emotional component is very important. I don't think that there would be another norm at work because I've seen the beliefs. We see what they believe. Okay, what they believe is very much in line with having a norm of fairness, especially because I measure also normative expectation. I measure their belief about what the majority believes, and they are very consistent. In behavior, then, you know, the beliefs and behavior are inconsistent. I think what was suggested of, you know, having 2 groups, and in one group, basically, you know, the meritorious proposer is just meritorious because he or she responded well to a series of questions, while in the second group, the proposer really worked hard and put a lot of effort. Then I think behavior may be different because they would recognize, hey, here, you know, this guy or this woman really made an effort. But, you know, it remains to be seen.
All right. Thank you. Really great data. I want to jump on a line of reasoning very similar to Eric's question about if there are possible other norms going on here. So there were 2 things in the data presented that I was curious about. So one was, so you said this, as the cost of adjustment increases, adjustment decreases. So
not dramatically, but yeah.
Yeah. So
8-2 versus 7-3. You know, on average. When, let's say, they punish, let's say they're all punishment, the 7 goes to 5, okay? Right. So I punish basically each quarter, you know, you lose $1.
Right, right.
Okay?
So because it seemed to me the proportion of people who did not do any adjustment at all, so it was like something like 88% in the 7-3 and 75% in the...
No.
Could we take up that slide? Because,
not at all.
This slide, yeah. So 88% overall compensate and 70% overall compensate.
88% overall compensate. Yeah. Some of these also punish.
Exactly,
okay?
and then 70%.
70% so overall compensate. Yeah. So compensation is more expensive here.
Right, right. Compensation is more expensive if you want to go to 5-5, right?
Yes.
So, but you could
go to 4, let's say.
Right, exactly. And so this is why I'm curious. So they choose to, it seems like they choose to do all or nothing. So they want to either go to the focal point, and this is much more expensive. So then there's a disincentive to...
It's true.
To.
It's true.
So my question, so this was a curious, so why aren't they just doing a small amount of so you could see the same compensation rate, 88% in both conditions, just that in day 2, they just compensate a smaller amount. They wouldn't go the full length. This was curious. So it seems like it's as if I'm saying, if I'm going to compensate you, I'm going to compensate you to the level I think is fair. But if I can't afford to take you to the level I think is fair, then I'm not going to do it at all, because otherwise I'd be...
Still is only 30% who don't do anything.
Right, but it's twice as many. But in this
you know,
$1,
88
right?
versus 70
yes,
is
but
interesting.
It's because it's 12% versus 30% that are not doing anything.
Yeah.
So that's twice as many.
Yeah.
That's really...
Yeah.
So
because, as I say, selfish concern is stronger. But it's interesting.
Yeah.
They wouldn't go...
A little bit, right?
No, it's
so
very interesting. They have this focal point, it's 5.
Mm.
And we didn't ask question after. You know, we don't ask question after typically because people rationalize and they can tell you whatever they want. But it might be interesting, okay, to know why, is a very good question, why people, you know, instead of bringing, let's say, up to 5, let's bring them up to 4, you know, is okay. Actually, I would have to check. Those that compensate and punish may bring, you know, because I have to spend quite a bit of money. Those 30%, I have to check, but I would say probably they don't go to 5 because they have to balance. But those that just compensate, they go to 5.
Right.
Yeah. You know, they balance, is a trade-off between the cost and the focal point, basically. Yeah.
Any more questions? Everything is clear? Okay. And we thank the speaker again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.